The Archer estate was a palace of glass, steel, and silence. Perched atop the hills of Northern California, it overlooked valleys filled with wealth, yet inside its walls, it echoed with something far colder: regret. Nicholas Archer, one of the world's most influential billionaires, walked its hallways daily with the same precision he once used to build his empire: measured, mechanical, void of emotion. Since the accident that took his wife and left his only son Elliot paralyzed from the neck down, Nicholas had buried himself in work, in numbers, in anything that didn't involve facing his son's eyes, the ones that looked so much like his mother's, and now, were forever still. Elliot had once been the heart of the Archer household, curious, bright, and always dancing. He had this charming way of twirling through the hallways when music played, pretending to conduct imaginary orchestras or choreograph his own symphonies. But now, his world was confined to a motorized wheelchair, blank stares, and blinking eyes that the doctors assured were nothing but involuntary reflexes. Nicholas never believed otherwise. Hope, after all, was dangerous. Hope led to pain. So he gave up trying to believe his son could ever return. That was until one Wednesday evening. Nicholas was returning early from a board meeting. The house was unusually quiet, save for the faint hum of a melody drifting down the hallway from Elliot's room. Curious, and mildly irritated, he followed the sound. As he approached the doorway, he paused, furrowing his brow at the soft piano tune playing from inside. He was about to call out when something stopped him cold. Through the slightly ajar door, Nicholas saw Maria, the maid, standing beside Elliot's wheelchair, barefoot on the wooden floor, gently swaying to the rhythm. In her hands, she held Elliot's, one in each of hers, and moved them side to side as if guiding him through an invisible waltz. Her eyes were closed, her lips curved into a soft smile, and she was humming a tune that Nicholas vaguely remembered, a lullaby his wife used to sing to Elliot as a boy. The sight stunned him. His first instinct was outrage. Was she mocking his son? Was this some emotional performance for her own amusement? His chest tightened, and he pushed the door open. Maria spun around, startled, but didn't drop Elliot's hands. Instead, her expression held something Nicholas hadn't seen in years: belief. "I'm sorry, sir," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't hear you come in." "What is this?" he asked sharply, motioning toward the scene before him. "What are you doing?" Maria hesitated, her eyes flickering to Elliot, whose expression remained unchanged, blank, paralyzed. I was just dancing with him." He blinked. "To the beat. I think he can feel the music." Nicholas stared at her, stunned into silence. For a moment, he considered firing her on the spot. But something about the way she spoke, tender, certain, full of unshaken faith, held him back. He looked at Elliot, expecting the same lifeless stillness. But then, was it possible? His eyelashes fluttered. Barely. Almost imperceptibly. But he saw it. Maria continued, her voice trembling now. "Every day after I finish cleaning, I come here. I talk to him. I sing. I tell him stories. And sometimes, I hold his hands and pretend we're dancing. I think, deep down, he hears me." And today, he blinked to the rhythm. Twice. Like he was listening. Nicholas felt a knot in his throat tighten. He didn't know what to say. He had hired Maria through a staffing agency, just another uniform in a long line of faceless workers. He hadn't cared where she came from or what she believed. But now, he was seeing her. Really seeing her. And somehow, in this quiet, strange, heartbreaking moment, she had done something that years of therapy, technology, and research hadn't. She had stirred something in Elliot. Or was it all in his mind? He didn't speak another word. He simply nodded, turned away, and walked back down the hallway. But that night, long after the house fell quiet, Nicholas opened his laptop and accessed the security camera footage from Elliot's room. What he watched changed everything. Nicholas had spent years drowning in silence, but now he found himself addicted to a single room's noise. Every evening, after his staff had retired and the last of his emails had been answered, he'd pour himself a glass of aged scotch, sit in the dim glow of his study, and watch hours of surveillance footage from Elliot's room. The cameras had once been installed for security. Now, they had a new purpose. To see what he had been too afraid to see. The first time he watched Maria gently cover Elliot with a blanket, whispering, "Sweet dreams, my little fighter," Nicholas scoffed at the sentiment. But then he noticed the small things. The way Elliot's eyelids fluttered when she brushed his hair. The slight uptick in his heart rate when Maria laughed. The faint movement in his throat when she read poetry aloud, her accent wrapping around each word like music. These weren't coincidences. They were responses. Night after night, Maria would enter the room like a ritual. She didn't treat Elliot like a body. She treated him like a boy. A person. Someone still here. She'd talk to him about her day, about how the garden needed watering, how she was trying a new recipe, how she missed her brother back home. She'd describe the clouds she saw through the skylight or hum lullabies her grandmother taught her back in El Salvador. And sometimes, she'd dance. She never called it that. Not aloud. But it was dancing, unmistakably so. She'd press play on the old record player, lift Elliot's hands, and move slowly around the room with him, her bare feet gliding, her eyes closed, her face peaceful. She moved with grace, with patience, with hope. And in those moments, Nicholas didn't see a maid. He saw a healer. He brought in his private physician, Dr. Levin, and showed him some of the footage. "Watch closely," Nicholas insisted. "You see that? When she hums, he blinks. When she sings, his heart rate changes." Dr. Levin, ever the clinical man, frowned. "It's likely reflexes. The brain can create automatic reactions even in catatonic states. Don't let false hope cloud your judgment, Nicholas." "But what if it's not false?" Nicholas whispered. "What if he's still in there?" The doctor hesitated, then said something that stuck in Nicholas's mind like a splinter. "If he is, then she's the only one who's been speaking his language." Nicholas began taking an interest in Maria. He learned that she wasn't just a maid. She had once been a caregiver at a pediatric rehabilitation center in Guatemala. She'd studied music therapy briefly before moving to the US to support her family. She wasn't formally certified in neurology or psychology, but she understood people. More importantly, she understood hope. One afternoon, Nicholas did something he hadn't done in months. He stepped into Elliot's room. Maria looked up, startled to see him there. She was sitting beside Elliot's bed, holding one of his hands, her other hand lightly tapping his knuckles in rhythm with a soft Spanish lullaby playing on her phone. Nicholas cleared his throat. "Do you really believe he hears you?" Maria looked him squarely in the eyes, no fear, no hesitancy. Just quiet truth. "Yes. Not just hears me. He feels everything. I don't know how I know. I just do." Nicholas pulled up a chair and sat beside her, beside them, for the first time. He looked at his son, the boy who once danced across marble floors with chocolate on his cheeks and laughter in his lungs, and saw, perhaps for the first time in 4 years, life. The days that followed became different. Nicholas called in neurologists, therapists, and researchers. He ordered advanced EEG scans and neural response tests. He even contacted a cutting-edge neurorehabilitation center overseas. But through it all, he made one thing clear. Maria stays. She's not just a maid anymore. She's part of his care team. Some advisors pushed back. She has no medical training, they argued. But Nicholas silenced them with a single sentence. She reached him when the rest of us stopped trying. Soon, a structured therapy program began. Maria's dance sessions were now part of Elliot's daily routine. Nicholas even installed a music studio in the wing, hiring a professional pianist to work alongside Maria. They tried rhythm stimulation, tactile engagement, eye-tracking software, even smell and memory stimulation, all inspired by Maria's instincts. And then, one morning, everything changed. Maria was reading a poem aloud when Elliot's eyelid twitched twice, slowly, deliberately. She paused, heart pounding. "Elliot," she whispered. "Do that again." He blinked. Once. Then again. She ran to Nicholas, tears spilling before the words could form. He blinked. "Nicholas," he blinked. Nicholas rushed to the room. Maria grabbed a whiteboard and a marker. "One blink for yes. Two for no," she told Elliot softly. "Okay. Blink." "Yes." Nicholas fell into the nearest chair. For a moment, all the years of sorrow, anger, guilt, they collapsed into something raw and indescribable. Hope. Not distant. Not theoretical. Real. Measurable. Present. "Elliot," he choked out, kneeling beside the chair, "can you hear me?" Blink. Tears fell freely now from Nicholas's eyes. He took his son's hand for the first time in years, not as a reminder of tragedy, but as a lifeline. Maria stood silently behind them, tears on her cheeks as well, watching the man who built tech empires finally listen to the music of the human soul, one his own son had been singing quietly all along. It started with blinking. But soon, blinking wasn't enough. Elliot, long thought to be trapped in an unresponsive body, began communicating through a simple alphabet board Maria designed. One blink per letter, one blink per breath. The process was slow, exhausting, but miraculous. And what stunned Nicholas most wasn't just that Elliot was alive in there. It was what he chose to say. The first message took nearly an hour to complete. Maria knelt beside him, whispering each letter aloud, waiting for the blink that meant yes. Nicholas stood frozen behind her, watching, barely breathing. Finally, the message was complete. Four small words scrawled carefully on the board. "Thank you, Maria. Always." Maria pressed a hand to her mouth, trembling. Nicholas turned away, overcome. The boy he had thought was lost, unreachable, locked in a silent prison, had just said thank you. And not to him. To her. The weeks that followed were filled with what could only be called transformation. Nicholas flew in a world-renowned neurologist from Zurich, who confirmed what the blinking and monitoring suggested: Elliot had locked-in syndrome. He was aware. Fully conscious. Trapped inside a body that refused to obey him. And yet, despite that, Elliot had survived. Not just physically. Emotionally. Spiritually. Cognitively. And Nicholas knew, without a doubt, that Maria was the reason why. As Elliot began showing more signs of subtle movement, a twitch in his right index finger, a soft flutter of his lips, a slight shift in his pupils, Nicholas accelerated the care program. He converted the estate's eastern wing into a neuro-rehab center, outfitted with the best technology, physicians, and therapists. But amidst all the innovation and investment, Maria remained the heart of it all. Every day, she was there. Singing. Reading. Dancing. And Nicholas, once the stoic man of logic and steel, began dancing too, in his own way. He started reading to Elliot at night. He'd bring old books from Elliot's childhood, comic strips, and poetry. At first, his voice trembled, foreign in this act of tenderness. But with time, it steadied. And with time, a father and son who hadn't spoken in years began speaking again, in blinks, in breaths, in love. One particular afternoon stood out like a thread of gold in the fabric of those days. Maria had brought in a soft jazz record, one Elliot used to love. The same tune he used to hum and twirl to as a boy. She placed the record on the player, adjusted the volume, and gently took Elliot's hands. He was still unable to stand, still unable to speak. But she moved with him anyway. 1 step. 2 steps. Gentle turns, slow and full of reverence. Nicholas watched from the doorway, his heart aching in ways he couldn't explain. "May I?" he asked, his voice catching. Maria looked up, surprised, then nodded. Nicholas walked over, placed a trembling hand on his son's shoulder, and the three of them stood there. Elliot in his wheelchair, Maria holding one hand, Nicholas the other, swaying together to a melody that once lived in the background, now reborn as the heartbeat of their healing. That night, Elliot spelled out another message with his blinking. "I don't feel trapped when she dances with me." Nicholas sat beside him and whispered, "You're not trapped anymore, son. We're going to get you back." Word spread quietly, then wildly. A medical journal published an article about the unlikely recovery. They spoke of Nicholas Archer's funding, the advanced technology, the neuroregeneration. But what caught the public's attention was the mention of a humble maid named Maria, who had inspired the breakthrough. Interviews were requested. News crews tried to get onto the property. Nicholas declined every one, until the day he decided the world needed to hear the truth. He arranged a private press conference on the estate. Journalists, doctors, and executives gathered beneath a white canopy, expecting a typical announcement, a new foundation, a medical breakthrough, maybe even a product line. But what they got was very different. Nicholas stood before them, uncharacteristically without a script. His voice was steady but emotional. "I've spent my life building machines. Solving problems. Investing in innovation. But I forgot the most powerful form of healing isn't in what we invent, it's in what we feel. My son was locked inside his own body for 4 years. We thought he was lost to us. But one woman, one quiet, kind, beautiful soul, refused to give up on him." He paused, looking out at the stunned faces. She didn't have a medical degree. She didn't have wealth. She didn't have power. But she had faith. And music. And the bravery to dance with a boy no one believed could still feel. He turned toward Maria, who stood to the side, frozen in disbelief, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "Maria," he said, voice breaking now, "you saved my son. You saved me. And whatever the world says about who belongs in what room, know this, you will always belong in his story. In our story." Then, in front of cameras, journalists, and the stunned medical world, Nicholas Archer knelt and thanked the maid who had danced his son back to life. That in the months that followed the press conference, the world began to watch the Archer estate like it was a miracle unfolding in real time. News outlets clamored for updates. Medical experts from around the globe wanted access to the research, the therapy models, the scans, but most of all, they wanted to meet the woman whose name had become synonymous with hope. Maria Alvarez. A woman who had come to clean the dust off marble floors but ended up restoring life to a broken family. Despite the attention, Maria remained the same, humble, gentle, and completely focused on Elliot. Fame didn't interest her. Praise made her uncomfortable. The only thing she truly cared about was the boy who now smiled with his eyes, blinked with purpose, and, astonishingly, had started to regain small, voluntary movements in his right hand. At first it was a twitch. Then a slow bend of his index finger. Then he managed to tap out, high, on a touchscreen device Nicholas had customized for him. It wasn't long before Elliot could scroll, type short messages, and even, for the first time in years, laugh aloud, though it came out strained and broken. Still, it was laughter. Real. Raw. Beautiful. Nicholas changed too. He had once filled rooms with silence, his presence cold and commanding. Now, the rooms he walked into were warmer, not because of the architecture, but because he had learned how to listen. He spent time in Elliot's room daily, not out of guilt, but out of love. He asked questions. He listened to stories Maria told. He told some of his own. About Elliot's mother, about his boyhood, about the nights he sat outside the hospital, praying for a sign. The greatest change of all came on a bright April morning, one that Maria would never forget. It was Elliot's 18th birthday. Maria had planned a quiet gathering, just Nicholas, a few therapists, and a homemade cake. She never imagined Nicholas had been planning something far greater. When she walked into the East Garden that morning, she froze. The space had been transformed. Paper lanterns floated in the breeze. A live string quartet played softly under a silk canopy. The staff, once uniformed and anonymous, were dressed in soft blues and whites. There was a banner that read, "Happy 18th, Elliot, keep dancing." And in the center, on a specially designed dance platform, stood a wheelchair, adorned with subtle lights and smooth, rotating wheels. Nicholas approached Maria, dressed in a dark navy suit, his expression one of nervous hope. "Will you dance with him?" he asked. Maria looked at him, overwhelmed. "Here. In front of." "In front of everyone," Nicholas said gently. "So they know what a miracle looks like." Maria stepped forward, trembling. She placed her hand on Elliot's and gave him a soft nod. He blinked once, yes. The music began to play. A soft, slow waltz. And then, under the soft shimmer of spring sunlight, Maria danced with Elliot again, just as she had the first time, but now with the world watching. His arms, once limp, now moved ever so slightly with hers. His right hand curled around hers. His eyes closed, not in paralysis, but in peace. Nicholas stood nearby, his throat tight, barely able to breathe. A photographer captured the moment, just as the breeze caught Maria's hair and Elliot's smile shone, faint but unmistakable. That image would later go viral, circulating across every platform, news outlet, and home. A woman dancing with a boy once thought lost to silence. A billionaire standing quietly in the background, his eyes full of tears. The photo was captioned, "She danced him back to life." Weeks after the party, Nicholas made one final announcement. The eastern wing of the estate would be converted into a non-profit neurorehabilitation center, specializing in cases like Elliot's. It would be called the Elliot Archer Institute for Awakening Potential. And its first official program? The Maria Method, combining music, touch, storytelling, and movement. A curriculum built not in medical labs, but in love. Nicholas offered Maria a permanent role, not as staff, not as an employee, but as a co-director. A partner. At first, Maria declined. "I'm just a maid," she whispered. But Nicholas took her hand and shook his head. "No. You're the reason my son lived. And now, you'll help others live too."